There is probably alcohol within 30 feet of you right now. A bottle in a cupboard, cans in a fridge, something in a cabinet you've forgotten about. You didn't think about that. It's completely normal. Now here's the strange part. Almost nothing else on Earth can drink it. Give alcohol to a cat and you poison it. A dog, a horse, a bird. For most animals, ethanol is straightforwardly toxic. Their bodies have no efficient way to break it down. And yours does. You have a dedicated enzyme system for processing a substance that kills most other mammals. That is not an accident. And it did not start with beer. It started about 10 million years ago with an ape that came down out of the trees. Here's the situation. Fruit hangs on a branch and it's fine. Fruit falls on the ground and it starts to rot. Yeast gets into it. The sugar turns to ethanol. Overripe fallen fruit is essentially weak alcohol wrapped in food. For a tree-dwelling ape, that's rubbish. You eat what's on the branch. But an ape that spends more time on the ground has a problem and an opportunity. The fallen fruit is right there, and it's free calories, and it's mildly toxic. Unless something changes. In 2015, a biologist named Matthew Carrigan did something clever to find out when that change happened. He and his team reconstructed the ancient version of a gene called ADH4, which makes the enzyme that breaks down ethanol. They rebuilt the enzymes our ancestors would have carried at different points in the past and tested them in the lab. Most of those ancient enzymes were poor at handling ethanol. Then, at one point on the family tree, roughly 10 million years ago, the enzyme suddenly gets about 40 times better. 40 times. From one change. And that point on the tree is the common ancestor of humans, chimpanzees, and gorillas. Around the same period, those apes were spending more time on the ground. So the ability to drink is older than our species. Older than our genus. It is roughly 10 million years old, and it did not evolve for pleasure. It evolved because rotting fruit was food, and the ones who could stomach it ate better. You are not weak-willed for liking a drink. You are carrying a 10 million-year-old adaptation for finding calories on the forest floor. Which brings us to a much more recent question. Not when could we drink, but when did we start making it on purpose? And the answer is embarrassing for a story we've told for 100 years. The standard story goes, humans settled down, domesticated grain, learned to bake bread, and beer showed up later as a happy accident. Bread first. Beer second. Obviously. Then archaeologists looked at a cave in Israel called Raqefet. There are stone mortars cut into the floor of that cave, and in 2018, a team led by Li Liu at Stanford analyzed the residue left inside them. They found the chemical and microscopic signatures of brewing, starch grains damaged in the specific ways that happen during malting, mashing, and fermenting. The site is roughly 13,000 years old. That is before farming. These were Natufian hunter-gatherers, and the cave was a burial ground, which means the beer probably wasn't casual. It looks like it was made for the dead, for a funeral. And here's the part that should genuinely bother you. Those mortars had been known about for years. Stone basins in a cave floor. Cataloged, measured, filed as food processing equipment. Nobody tested them for fermentation because nobody was looking for beer that early. The evidence sat in the ground while the assumption sat on top of it. Some researchers now argue the whole order might be backwards. That we may have started cultivating grain not to eat, but to brew. That beer helped build agriculture, rather than agriculture producing beer. That's still argued about. But it is on the table, and 20 years ago, it wasn't. Now, one story, because it tells you what this stuff was actually for. In 1957, archaeologists opened a tomb at Gordion in Turkey, associated with the father of King Midas. Inside were more than 100 drinking vessels, and a dried residue nobody could identify. Decades later, a scientist named Patrick McGovern analyzed that residue and worked out the recipe. Grape wine, barley beer, and honey mead mixed together. Then a brewery reproduced it. You could buy it in a bottle. Somebody worked out the funeral drink of an Iron Age king from crust in a bowl, and then people drank it again, 2,500 years later. Because that's what this was. Not a habit. An event. Rare, difficult to make, and almost always shared. You drank at funerals, harvests, and weddings with the whole group because one person could not produce it alone. There's a word still carrying that. The Greeks had a gathering called a symposium. It means, roughly, drinking together. We kept the word. It's a symposium, an academic conference. We took the word for a drinking party and gave it to people presenting slides. So here's what actually changed. The molecule is the same one the ape on the forest floor was eating. Your enzymes are the same 10-million-year-old machinery. What changed is everything around it. It went from rare to constant, from difficult to effortless, from a thing the whole group did together at a moment that mattered to something one person does alone on a Tuesday in front of a screen, out of a can that took no effort from anyone they know. We kept the drink. We lost the occasion.